fabulous. Well, I can only see, oh, it says it's recording in progress. I can only see a few of you. I can't see all of you, which is terrible. So anyway, I can see got it. I'm thinking got it, right? I know I'm being recorded, right? I'm being recorded. Oh, participants 14. Can I see you all? Let's see if I can. Is there anything I can do to see you all? Oh yeah, I can see some of you. Hi. Yes, I can see all the names. Right. So I'm supposed to be talking to you about Succot. Sukkos, depending on your pronunciation, whether you're modern Israeli, Sephardi, then it's Sukkot. Sukkos, if you're Scottish, it's Sukkos. And the main thing you have to realize about Sukkos, it is mega fun. It is really the most fabulous thing in the entire world, particularly if you're young. I mean, kids get to sleep out under the stars with mere sort of like branches and stuff on top of them. And it's really fabulous, except if you're in the countryside and there are bears, of course. But I mean, generally, it's really, really good fun. I remember there was a large school, a Church of England school in Liverpool, where the Beatles came from, and where I studied for 3 years, believe it or not. After I was a rabbi, I did post-rabbinic stuff in Liverpool, of all strange places. And there was a big school, I think it was called St. Margaret's, and I haven't thought of that name for about 40 years, which is embarrassing, but never mind. I'm almost sure it's called St. Margaret's. And so they asked me to give an assembly and explain what Sukkot or Sukkot was all about. I thought, what? And I think I do remember about 800 kids, ranging from 12 to 18. And they're all sitting there looking at this weird guy who's apparently a rabbi. What are they? With a Scottish accent. That's weird. And I had to sort of like explain to them what Sukkot was. So I scratched my head. That's it. I'll talk about this. I want to imagine, I said, sleeping in a Christmas tree for a whole week. That's how exciting it is, right? I mean, for kids, I mean, that, and they really got it, and that's really what the Sukkah is, I suppose. The reason we have it, and the reason we got this incredible festival, well, the Torah says we've got it, so we got it, but apparently it recalls one of two things, a bit of an argument in the Talmud. When the Jews came out from Egypt, and we were in the desert for 40 years, where did we live? There were no hotels. So the answer is, one opinion says, the sukkahs that we build every year, assemble and disassemble, are to remind us of the fact that we were protected miraculously by clouds which surrounded us, and it was air-conditioned clouds, which was really good. And people couldn't get in unless they had a sort of like pass card, retinal scan, and it kept us protected from the environment outside, which was obviously harsh, being in the desert. Right. One. Other opinion says no. That's what they lived in. They built sort of like temporary little like. So have you all seen Sukkot? You all seen these sort of things? Yes, some no. Right? Yes, yeah, square. Yes. Ariel's doing square thing. Yeah, that's it. It can be different shapes, but never mind. And so that's what they built, something like temporary little huts, and lived in those. Whichever way you look at it, we're regaining that experience once a year. And I say for the kids, it is mega, mega exciting. That's the Sukkah bit of it. The other bit of Sukkot is well known. It's the, I always think this is weird. In Hebrew, it's called Arba Minim. In English, they call it, wait for this, the 4 species. And I always think, for some reason, you say species of a science fiction horror movie. I don't know, I've never seen a science fiction movie called Species, but I think there is one. And, species, different planet, species and stuff like that. But anyway, so there's 4 species. And does anybody know what the 4 species are? General knowledge question. A trip to Toronto, for those living in Toronto, is the first prize. Pepsi. Not Coke anymore. They told me to be less white. I told them to drop dead. Anyway, so anybody know what the 4 species are? Total silence.
The
All right.
etrog, the lulav, the...
Oh, okay, one at a time, because I happen to have here, this is not just any ordinary share, examples. Now, my wife bought me that last year. Isn't that cool? Solid silver. This was, it was an anniversary present or a birthday present, something like that. But I can't get the thing open. Oh, yeah, here we go. So in here is an estrog, just in case you've never seen one. And this is a gorgeous estrog. I fell in love with this estrog at first sight. Even though I told you in a previous share, there's no such thing as love at first sight. That's with another human being. But with a plant, It can be instantaneous. I fell instantly in love with this esrog. Look at the shape, right? And they all symbolize things. That's the esrog. I'll go through them quickly. I can show you three because I haven't got my fourth at the moment. There's the esrog. Then there's the lulav, which is a palm branch. It's in a plastic bag. I hope you'll be able to see this. There, can you see this chap inside this? And it's a closed palm branch. Cut at the bottom here. Doesn't go out like that. Palm branch. So that's palm branch, lulav, and then you've got things called hadassim, which is myrtle branches. 3 of them, and then 2 are called arovas or weeping willow. 4 things, 4 species. And you take these 4 species and you hold them together. I've got a little holder that goes down. The lulav goes in the middle, and these other 2 go there. And then you hold your esrog. Here he comes again. Yep. In your hand, and you sort of like shake it about and have a fabulous time. And each one symbolizes different things. The esrog symbolizes the heart. In fact, it looks a little bit the shape of a heart. I mean, a real heart, not a sort of like pretend cartoon thing, which is nothing like heart. I remember when I had a stent in my heart a couple of years ago. I had a stress test, and the doctor, after I went, he said, come with me. I went into his office, and he had a plastic model of the heart sitting in his desk. Doctors do that. And he takes his plastic model and said, this is your heart, which obviously wasn't literal, or I'd be dead. But anyway, so basically, and he told me what was wrong, and we're going to put a stent. That was very nice. But the esrog's meant to be the heart. That is meant to be the shedra. It's meant to be the spine of a person. Then these are meant to be, if you look at it's the shape of the leaf, but you can't see it. Meant to be eyes. Ariana's looking close. Eyes. And then the one I can't get, if you can, I don't know if you can picture a weeping willow. It's got a thin leaf-shaped leaf. Did I say leaf-shaped leaf? Why not? And they're meant to be like lips. Okay. And if we're at time for a Kabbalistic shiur, I would tell you all about the symbolism they are in. However, the main one I want to focus on is what each of these 4 species is supposed to symbolize, which is different kinds of Jews. Because the esrog, I'll put it away, I'm not bringing them out again. The esrog has got a taste because it's a lemon fruit, really. It's actually sweet. So I can't remember what its Latin name is. Lemonus hebraicus or something. Anyway, so basically that thing there has got a taste and a smell. And the taste and the smell is supposed to symbolize Torah and mitzvahs. So it symbolizes a Talmud Chacham, a learned Jewish man or Jewish woman who's got Torah and mitzvahs. Fine. And then you've got the date tree. The dates, of course, is a fruit with a taste, but it's got no smell. Have you ever tried smelling a date? Wasting your nose. It doesn't happen. But it's got a taste. That symbolizes Jews who have Torah but no mitzvahs. And then you have the myrtle, which has got smell but no taste. And that symbolizes Jews who've got mitzvahs but no Torah. And then you've got the poor old weeping willow, which has got no taste or smell, which symbolizes Jews who've got absolutely nothing, which is a bit sad. No Torah, no mitzvahs. But what do? We bring them all together. We bring them all together. Now, there is something linking the idea of the Sukkah and the 4 species. And that is a word which we've talked about before in our shiur, and it's called humility or anivut. There is, have you ever heard of the Ramban? Have you ever come across, ever studied the Ramban, Nachmanides? Anybody mentioned them to you in a shiurim? He lived in 1194, shortly before I was born. And the Ramban lived in a place called Barcelona, which was then the capital of a country called Aragon, which was big, owned half of Italy as well, which is interesting. And famously, he's one of the most famous commentators in the whole of Torah. He was a doctor and a philosopher, big Kabbalist, and one of the main pillars of Orthodox Jewish thought and Jewish commentary on the Torah. But his most famous episode was when he was forced by the king of Aragon into a disputation in 1263. So he must have been 67 or something, so not a young man, especially in those days. 67 must have been ancient. Anyway, so basically, he was forced into this disputation with a Jew who converted to Christianity in front of the king, in front of debate with them for 4 days whose religion was right. This was a very common feature of the Middle Ages, by the way. The church was very keen on disputations, particularly as they let the rabbi know that if he had the chutzpah to win the debate, they would lay on a pogrom. So officially, they always tended to win. So when the king summoned the Ramban and said, you have to debate with this guy called Pablo Cristiani, he refused. Dangerous thing in those days to refuse king's commands. The king summoned him, demanded he explained his behavior, and he said, if I win, they'll kill the Jews of my community. So the king gave his personal assurance that that would not happen. And indeed, when the Ramban won the debate after 4 days, and I've got it there on my bookshelves, 4 days, he made mincemeat of them. He wiped the floor with them. And not only did he win the argument, he did it with good old-fashioned Yiddish chutzpah. It's funny. If you ever go to Israel and you go to Tel Aviv, there's a place called the Beit HaTfutzot. And the Beit HaTfutzot is the museum of the diaspora. And it's got a little glass display with little figures that are meant to be the Ramban in the court of King James I of Aragon. You put on headphones and you can listen to the debate in English, where you discover that the Ramban actually came from Brooklyn. He's got a Brooklyn accent. Oh, listen here, Your Majesty. If what that priest's saying is true, it's total garbage. And the priest says, yeah, you think? And so really ridiculous. Awful, awful. But the actual argument is really funny because he really does make fun of them. And just because you can use humor very effectively to, when somebody is pompous and stuck up and talking nonsense, a little joke here and there can do, it's a bit like a landmine, boom, and they blow themselves up. Anyway, that was the famous Ramban. Now, every week I have the custom, I made up my own custom. I'm not supposed to do that, but I did anyway. He wrote a letter to his son, and I read it. There it is, boom, in a little book here, and I read it every week. So I thought, as my dad's no longer around, even though I'm obviously a granddad, it's still nice to be a son as well. And somebody once told me, I thought it was very wise, as long as you still have parents, you're still a child. Which was quite clever. Anyway, so I'm obviously still keen on being a child. So I've now adopted the Ramban as my father. He hasn't objected that I know about. Anyway, so it starts off and he says, this is the famous bit, maybe you've heard this, it's even a song. Shema b'ni musar avicha. Listen, my son, to the musar, to the advice of your father, and don't abandon the Torah of your mother. That's the famous opening words. When he gets the second paragraph, he says the following thing. He's talking about how you should always avoid losing your temper. This is very hard for a Scotsman to listen to. That's why I read it. All right. It helps me be un-Scottish, which from a rabbi point of view, that's good. So don't lose your temper, ever. Okay. And then he says, because once you get rid of anger, you'll start to develop the essential Jewish character trait of humility, which is the greatest and best of all character traits you can possibly get hold of, if you can get hold of humility, if you can develop humility. In fact, of course, I have developed humility. One of the first amongst many traits that I perfected. No, joking. But you get the idea. If you can get rid of anger, that will lead you to humility. Humility is essential, and it's something that women do innately better than men. I think if you've been with me in my previous Seriously Sold series, you will know I think we've talked about this. Women are innately in a higher spiritual level than men. And if you want to boil it down to the why at the core, women are innately better than men, which Judaism clearly says. It's because women have less ego. Your average woman has less ego than your average man. So my wife tells me repeatedly, but it's actually true. Women are innately less egocentric than men are. I'll tell you something absolutely astonishing. You know, of course, that the first Jews were Avram and Sarah, right? I remember I was in South Africa, said he going off that tangent. I remember in South Africa, and somebody, this was a few years ago, if those of you who go to my YouTube channel, I just let that slip out. More humility there. He's got a YouTube channel. Isn't he awesome? Anyway, so if you go to my YouTube channel, you will see me lecturing in South Africa to an audience of 2,000 or 5,000 altogether. And one of the questions was asked of me from the audience was, Judaism doesn't seem to put too much emphasis on laughter I was very intrigued by the question. And I said, what makes you say so? He said, well, apart from Purim, when people dress up and get drunk and stuff like that, that's the kid's favorite Jewish festival. After that comes Sukkot. Then he said, that's it. And I said to him, what was the name of the first Jewish child? And he said, Abraham. I said, no. Abraham was an adult when he embraced Judaism. He was the first convert to Judaism, as was his wife, the first female convert from Judaism. Who was the first name of the first Jewish child? Can anybody answer that while I sip my Pepsi? What was the name of the first Jewish child?
Isaac?
Yes, Isaac. Yitzchak in Hebrew, Isaac, absolutely. And the word Yitzchak, the name Yitzchak, comes from the word Succot, which means to laugh. Laughter. Laughter is so critical and so crucial and so fundamental to Judaism. The first Jew, the first born Jew, was named by his parents Yitzchak, somebody who would laugh, which is interesting, I think, in its own right. But back to Sarah and Abram. Sarah was a greater prophetess and Abram was a prophet. That's quite clear. All the Jewish books behind me made that point very clearly. Sarah was greater than Abram. Why? Well, because Sarah was a woman. They had the exact same family. They came from the exact same family, right? It was uncle and niece. Abram married his niece, who was his wife Sarah. So that's that. So they come from the same family. They come from the same background, the same education. What is it that makes her better than him? Answer: she was a female. She was a woman. She had less ego. And you see this. Now, this is going to. What did my introducer say? Blow your socks out the window. I'm about to blow your socks out the window. I can only see your head, so I'm assuming you're wearing socks. She said you're wearing socks. I'll show you. Anyway, here we go. If you look in Psalms, Tehillim, and if you look in Tehillim and you look in, I wrote the place down here. It is Psalm 45 in this verse 10. It says the following thing: Kol kavuda bas melech penina. The whole glory of the daughter of the king is privacy. I'm struggling to translate this word. It's generally taken to mean sneers. If you come across the concept of sneers, you must have come across that. So general is meant to be modesty in behavior, modesty in dress. Incidentally, it applies both to men and women. But it's really, the word actually means to be a private person. Your ultimate relationship should be between you and God, not out there in the public eye. Problem with being in the public eye is then you start to behave, or your behavior starts to adjust itself to what people think you should do as opposed to what you should do and what you should believe. I mean, imagine a Hollywood star, a major Hollywood star, saying something which is not woke. How long would they last before they are hounded out of Hollywood? A second. If you're in the public eye, then you tend to do what the public wants of you. You're expected to be a private person. Okay, now, there's a ton to say there, and maybe in the new year we'll be able to talk about that in more depth. However, the interesting thing is, who is this Bat Melech? The whole honor of the daughter of the king is privacy. And who's the daughter of the king? Anybody want to guess who it's referring to? King David wrote this. Who is the daughter of the king that's being discussed in this verse in Psalms? Anyone want to guess the name?
Bathsheba.
Bathsheba, somebody said. Good guess. Nope. Netta? Was
The
you that said
only
Bathsheba?
Bat Melech that I can think of specifically is Michal, but Michal wasn't so tznuah.
Michal, right? The daughter of King Shaul. Yes. Any others?
Oh, we're
Okay, I'm
looking
driving
for.
you. Yeah, go on, Netta. Yeah.
No, I didn't realize we're looking for the modest one.
Well, if you look
answer-
at the perspective that Hashem is Melech, it's every woman. Every Jew.
Well, here. Well, in actual fact, here's the surprise. It's talking about Moshe Rabbeinu. Now there's a problem with that. I'm sure you spotted the problem there, right? Moshe is a man, or as we Orthodox Jews say, a non-woman. Moshe is a non-woman, clearly a non-woman. And therefore, if it's talking about Moshe, couldn't we have found a nice verse that says the whole honor of the son of the king, the prince, is humility, modesty, whatever you want to say? And the answer is when Moshe is on the highest spiritual level, that he can be called the child of the king, it's the daughter of the king. He's at the highest spiritual level, he's effectively occupying a female position, a female role. What was his number one character trait? What was Moshe's number one character trait he's famous for?
Humility.
Humility. There we go. We've completed the circle. When he reaches the highest level, he's perfected his humility. It's a female definition, a female description, because women are innately more modest. In other words, they have not inflated male egos. Men are pretty bad incidentally with this. As my wife likes to say, men are fixers. They like to fix stuff. I think I told you, if you've ever been to the Hotel Maravi, the Western Mall, I think we did this in one of our sessions. If you look at women praying, usually they have the cedar up to their faces like this. They're quietly, perhaps swaying back and forth, tears streaming down their cheeks, praying to God that their sick child should get better, or their financial situation should improve, or their marriage should improve, whatever the problem is. If you take the camera and switch to the male side, it's like this. Men are fighting with heaven. We are going to change heaven's decree. And by the
So,
time
Rabbi, does that mean
Yes?
that Moshe had a female soul?
No, he just behaves. We're talking about that particular humility is basically a female character trait, and a man should try to achieve it. If you do, then you will be crowned with the term of the daughter of the king. You've achieved a high spiritual level, a female one. Women are on a higher spiritual level. A man should try and achieve that. Yeah, it doesn't mean you have a spiritual soul. So to have a female or a male definition, you have to have a body. Certain sort of body with certain parts we call female, certain sort of bodies with other parts we call male, at least we used to. And if you don't have a body at all, you're a soul, you don't have a gender at all. The whole thing sort of like falls away. But anyway, the reason that Moshe Rabbeinu can be called the daughter of the king is because he is humble. Women are innately, it's a female term, it's a female strength that men have to struggle to achieve, which comes far easier to them. That's why Sarah is a greater prophetess than he is a prophet. Interesting. Okay. Now, this idea of humility is absolutely critical. There was a famous rabbi who lived in the 18th century in Prague. He was called the Nod of Yehuda. His real name was Landau, Rabbi Landau. And he wrote a letter, and the letter was to his community, bewailing the fact that they were obviously financially successful, building big houses, and apparently the noble ladies of the Czech court used to come and watch what the Jewish women were wearing, because they were wearing the latest fashions. So they wanted to see, if you want to see what really is in style in Paris or wherever, and they would go to see what the Jewish women were wearing. He said that very ostentatiousness, that very lack of humility. So you can see that humility is not just in sexual dress or in many other attitudes, but also in the way you deport yourself in the eyes of the world. When Jews buy or build huge houses, or they wear the most super duper expensive Gucci or Jimmy Choo type stuff, he says that causes anti-Semitism. It's innately a non-Jewish value to be in your face, to be ostentatious. It just offends against who we are. And like I said, that was the attitude that led to many an anti-Semitic outbreak, he said, in his time. In Spain, if we go back to the Ramban, of course, we all know about the terrible Spanish Inquisition of 1492. But before then, Jews occupied the greatest heights of financial success, and indeed were given noble titles by the kings of Spain, although it wasn't one United Kingdom at the time, and commanded armies, literally commanded and financed armies, which drove the Muslim presence from Spain. They saw themselves as, this is it. This was our home. When Jews start to behave ostentatiously, build huge houses, this is where we are. Yes, success. It's always a mistake. And historically, it almost always backfires, as it did in the Spanish Inquisition and the expulsion. You probably are aware that in our own lifetimes, not literally your lifetime, nor even mine, but certainly it was the case that at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, the most assimilated Jews in the world lived in which country? Which would you say?
Germany.
Yes, Germany. And I can't remember who, but some Reform rabbi famously declared in some speech, it caused a huge eruption. Berlin is our Jerusalem. Yeah, Berlin is our Jerusalem. Well, I don't need to tell you what happened with that. But when Jews start to see that this world, and in particular this non-Jewish part of the world, is where we belong and where we're comfortable, and that is our home, disaster always ensues. A sukkah is the antidote to that. A sukkah tells you that this world is extremely fleeting. Your tenure, our time in this world passes very, very quickly. And you shouldn't want to see it as your permanent place. So after we go through all the Rosh Hashanah thing, big spiritual moment, and Yom Kippur, wow, fasting and all that sort of stuff, and introspection and apologies for things we've done wrong, and accepting apologies, hopefully, from people who've sincerely apologized to us. Then there's another big message. It's fun, and the kids love it, but the profound message of sitting in the sukkah is just, before you go into the rest of the year, the serious part of the year, remember, it's not about materialism, and it's not about this physical world at all, because you're not going to be here for very long after all anyway. Remember, we did this in one of our sessions. Remember, King David, back to King David says that a man's life, woman's as well, roughly, is 70 years. Then he said maybe 80 years. Do you remember we talked about this? This ringing a bell? 70 years, okay? Have you ever worked that out, how much that is in days? 25,567 and a half days. Now, 70 years seems quite a long time, especially when you're young like yourselves, and I once was. You think you're going to live forever. Yeah, come on, right. I'm going to be forever. I mean, you know, intellectually you'll not feel as though you are. But it's actually only 25,567 and a half days. Doesn't sound very much. Suppose you graduate from college and you go and get your first job. So starting salary, $25,567.50. How are you going to be feeling about your career? Not so good. All right, so here's the good news. I don't know if you knew this, but from age 0 to 20, anything you may have done wrong is automatically not prosecuted by the heavenly court. That's quite good, that. Means to say, if you made mistakes, who didn't, and you're a bit embarrassed about it, I am, then in that case, you don't have to be too embarrassed because it's not written down. Because we anticipate that the first 20 years of your life is you getting it right as a Jew. You know, it's life experience. It's almost an apprenticeship. But the last remaining 50 years, that is really a life. That's an era, that's an epoch. So if we take 20 years, right, and when you get to 20, how many of the 25,567.5 days do you have left? 18,262.5 days. That doesn't sound a long time. Suppose you get to be 30. You've got 14,610 days. Suppose you get to be 50. 7,305 days. And suppose you get to be 60. Oh dear. Then you've got 3,652.5. And then you get to be 70. Bye. You're toast. Right. Well, that's not so good. But he did say 80. So maybe you get to 80, but then we'll bung on another 3,652.5 days. Doesn't seem a long time. The amount of time that you're here is very short. The amount of time you've got to achieve stuff is very short. And there's various stages in your life where you do achieve stuff. But to think that you're going to be here forever and to put all your effort into the big house and the big investments and the whole material world is a big mistake, because not everybody gets to be 70 or 80. And of course, I don't have to tell you, it really doesn't matter too much, I suppose. Ultimately, how long you're here is what you did with the time you were here that really distinguishes you and what you are, as opposed to the amount of time that you're here. Now let's go back to our, so going into Sukkot, theme, humility, right? Not building the big house, not seeing this world and making tons of money as the main, the be all and end all. What about the four species, four types of Jew? The important thing with that story is that every Jew is important. Now, you might be the big Talmud Chacham, the big rabbi, who's got the Torah at his fingertips and the mitzvahs. So that's good. That's very nice. But don't think that that's it and you've done your job. Hopeless. If that's your attitude, I'm okay. You're just looking after yourself and you're not touching other lives. What other lives? What about that guy over there? He's got Torah, but he's not into actually, I mean, he's from a frum home, or she's from a frum home. She does this stuff. You will meet people like this. Frum Jews who just do it on autopilot without putting any sincerity and any passion into it. No mitzvahs. So we hold them all together. And the other one who's got the mitzvahs but no Torah, we hold them together with the one who's got the Torah and the mitzvahs. And even the ones got nothing. They are incomplete. You can't do the mitzvah. Sukkot is incomplete. Our time here on the planet is incomplete unless you reached out and touched somebody else's life, unless you influenced, not even consciously, and unless you've become the sort of person that people could look at and say, yeah, I'd like to be like that. There's no greater compliment you'll ever get in your life is if you have become good, a good person in some aspect of your life, and it inspires somebody else to become good as well. That's it. Well done. That's a good life. It's not the question of the length, it's a question of the content. And the content of a Jewish life is not to focus in this world, not to focus on becoming rich. It's to focus on becoming a good person, rich in goodness as a human being that touches other human beings. All four of the species come together. And there's no mitzvah and there's no blessing you can make on it if you don't have all four together. There's no blessing that comes to a life unless the one who's got the spiritual passion, enthusiasm, knowledge touches lives of those who don't have that passion, enthusiasm, and knowledge. Does that make sense? With me so far? Okay. Right. So if that were to be the case, who would you say would be the most, how are we doing for time? 12:45. Right. I've got a time for at least one of my stories for you to share a story with you. And here we go. Who would you say is the most insignificant Jew influencing you in your life? That would be a legitimate thing to say. This person won't have an influence on me. Who would you say? You'll influence other people, but they'll have no influence on me. That sounds quite tricky, that one, doesn't it? Never asked that question before. But, of course, I prepared this.
It's really
so I know the
rude.
answer. Sorry?
I feel like that's a really rude question.
No, it's not rude. You'll see when I tell you the answer, it's not rude. I don't do rude. Chic Ariella Seagull. Shame on you. Told you, I'm humble. Well, a child's not going to really influence you. You're there to influence them. You're the parent, or you're the sister, or you're the big sister, or you're the the teacher, or whatever it is. You're looking after the kids. What influence are they going to have in you? Surprisingly, in Judaism, can be a big one. Well, back to Moses. He had a big sister. You remember the name of his big sister?
Miriam?
Miriam. And the Jews were in a terrible state in Egypt, and they were enslaved, and things were terrible. And the men gave up hope. Again, notice the men gave up hope. And the greatest rabbi of his generation, it was Moses' father, he said, what is the point of bringing children into this world where the boys are going to be killed and the girls are going to be enslaved in Egyptian society? He divorces his wife, Moshe's mother, in order there's not going to be any more children, because when the greatest rabbi generation does so, everybody else does it as well. And so there are no children being born. The men had given up hope. And this great rabbi, Moshe's father, is called Amram. His daughter, his little girl, says to him, Dad, your decree is crueler than that of Pharaoh. Pharaoh's only decreed against the boys. You've decreed against the boys and the girls. And his reaction, you're right. You're right. And he remarries his wife, and then they have a child, somebody called Moshe, which rather sort of like makes the point very strongly. She's just a little girl, but she has an effect on her father. I'm going to tell this story. I'm going to get this in. It's good. I used to teach in a seminary in Brooklyn, where people do not have accents, and there was a young lady there who afterwards, coincidentally, she was called Miriam, and she said to me, "Can I speak to you afterwards?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "How can it be that a Jewish couple can adopt a non-Jewish child, convert the Jewish child to Judaism?" And how that works, by the way, is if it's a boy, of course, it'll be a circumcision. Then there's a thing called a mikveh. If you come across that, the ritual pool that completes the conversion process for a man or a woman. And you take the child, and the mother goes down into the water with the child, and that's it. And the child is now halakhically a Jew until the age of 12 for a girl and 13 for a boy. At which point you have to tell them, you do know, of course, that you were converted. You do know you were adopted. That, of course, is something that clever parents would have told them anyway. Not a good idea to leave it to be a surprise of the teenagers. And that if at that point the child wants to back out, then fine, you can walk away. If the child doesn't object, then the child gets to, that's the last bit, the last piece of the puzzle, the last piece of the conversion goes into place. The child is Jewish. And she said, but that's crazy. How on earth can you be tied to a decision you made when you were 12 years of age? And I had to tell her, I said, you know, Miriam, that's my last outstanding big philosophical question with Judaism. It's always struck me as nuts. It made no sense to me either. I mean, would you like to be tied to a decision you made as you were 12? I mean, technically you're a woman in Jewish law. If you're 13, you're a man in Jewish law. I think I told you once I was a non-religious bar mitzvah, and the little boy stood up in the suit, which was a bit too big for him, with the bow tie, which was definitely too big for him, to begin his speech. He gets out his notes, he goes, "Today I am a man." And everybody burst out laughing, this little falsetto voice, because he's becoming a man. Within 6 months, like, "Dad, could I borrow your shaver, Dad? Where'd he go? Where'd he go? Where'd my son go?" But there is this like it's still 12. I would like to be tied to a decision I made when I was 12. I said, Miriam, that's my last question. I've always been troubled by that one. I don't know. Let me go away and look for it. And I've told you before, the most exciting sentence I know in the language is I don't know. When somebody asks me a question and my response is I don't know, I get very excited because I don't know means I can go and find out. It's an invitation to go and find out. And when you find something new, it's so exciting. And I couldn't find an answer to this. I looked at all my books, couldn't find an answer. I phoned up other rabbis who think about these sorts of things. Like me, no good answer. I even Googled it. A rabbi is getting desperate when he turns to Google. Anyway, so no answer there. And I thought to myself, but you know what? If this question has come to me, it must be that I've got to find the answer. And like so often is the case, when I thought about it profoundly and more deeply, I realized that the question is based on a premise which is false. It's a non-question. It was based on the assumption that how can you expect a 12-year-old girl to come to of course, this was, you can probably guess, this was Miriam's own story. Miriam's father was Russian and mother was Russian. They came here, obviously, from the former USSR. And what happened was that the father, he was Jewish, saw all these Jews, and he discovered his Jewish heritage. The mother converted, and the three kids converted. And now she's saying, I don't want to be Jewish. Or at least I don't want to be tied to being Jewish. I was forced. It was her question. After 3 or 4 times when I saw it in every week after that, I said, eventually I had the answer for you. I said, it's based on a wrong assumption. The assumption is, how can you expect the thought process of a 12-year-old girl or a 13-year-old boy to be reliable? It sounds ridiculous. Or does it? At what stage do you think that a person should make that adult decision of where to go? When they're 18? When, their hormones are all over the place and they're already doing drugs and sort of like, they can't just wait as a guy to, you can get the idea. Do what guys want to do when they're 18. Or you're going to wait till maybe they're 25, 26, married, and already divorced and bitter and angry? Who's to say that the clarity and the perspective that a child has, of course it's not sophisticated, of course it's not simple, but maybe a child sees things with a certain clarity, with a certain innocence, that's actually a better basis for making a life decision than somebody who's an adult. No, that's too much of a generalization. I'm sure you could poke holes in that, and I can poke holes in that. But you know what? The more I thought about that, I thought, yeah. And I just gave a talk. There was a lady who heard me speak. This thing called the Meaningful People podcast, and she heard me there, and she seemed to like me. It was her grandmother's 10th anniversary of passing. She died at 92. And so I went and talked about the grandmother, and I spoke. Afterwards, a lady came up and told me the following thing. She said, you know what? My daughter, when she was 9 years of age, we were living in Brooklyn in a place called Flatbush, and she came back from a neighbor's who invited her in for Shabbos to see what Shabbat was all about. She came back, and then she said to her parents, listen to this, we're doing something wrong. 9 years of age. We're doing something wrong. What she'd seen there was this, family full of Jewish stuff, rich in Jewish stuff. We're doing something wrong. Well, apparently that statement started a whole revolution in the family, and like all revolutions, there was, a lot of sparks flew. But the whole family actually became religious because of that young lady. It's an astonishing thing that she said, this is something wrong here. And the whole family, and the mother was telling me the story and brought her daughter over. It's a very, very attractive young lady, beautiful woman, 23 or so. She's married, fabulous. She created the whole family sort of like climbing their Jewish roots again. It's an astonishing thing. Sometimes a voice that you would have thought was irrelevant to me. A kid, what are they going to teach me? Sometimes children can teach us the most important thing. So we take these four things together, and if we've got a little humility, then we'll know what it says in Pirkei Avot. Who's a wise person? Somebody learns from anybody. And that's a young person as well. So it might be somebody who doesn't know as much as you. It might be somebody who doesn't have as much mitzvahs as you. But we're incomplete unless all those people, all those types of people come together. We touch other lives. It has to have a certain humility to get to that stage. It has to have a certain humility that's engendered by the fact that we let go of this world for a week. And that's a good thing to do going into the year when it starts in earnest and the winter starts to appear. I shall look forward. I hope they're going to have me back teaching you in the winter. And in case I don't see you for a week or two, have a great Sukkot. And if you go and see kids in their Sukkot, you'll see the fun. God bless all. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Pleasure as usual.
Chag Sameach.
Thanks, Thank you. Thanks all. Bye.